The internet changed our lives, making computers a necessity. My family was no exception, and a couple of years ago, we finally got one. At first, it was just a novelty. Laura used it for emails and games, the kids for schoolwork, and I used it to browse the web and indulge in adult content. Working late shifts at the factory, I usually didn't get home until after midnight. Unlike some guys, I never stopped for drinks. I went straight home. The house was always silent, and I'd pass the time on the computer. Eventually, I got bored and started reading stories online. That's when I stumbled upon a particular genre, infidelity. At first, they were just stories, but soon, they planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The more I read, the more I scrutinized my wife's behavior. I started questioning her, even arguing with her, despite her reassurances. Though I eventually read less, the unease never left. A strange thought lingered. If I ever caught her cheating, how would I react? Could it, in some twisted way, turn me on? I brought it up to Laura, but the conversation only raised more questions. Our marriage had started strong, but doubt had begun creeping in. Adding to this was Laura's sister, Megan, who had a well-earned reputation for promiscuity. While I had my share of reckless youth, Megan's escapades were another level. Stories of threesomes and wild encounters followed her everywhere. I knew Frank, her husband, from work. He had been a day-shift supervisor before transferring. When he invited me to his wedding with Megan, I wasn't thrilled. I had never liked Frank, mostly because of how he treated Laura. Despite her insistence that I had nothing to worry about, I made it clear I wouldn't tolerate any disrespect toward her. Laura and I had an unspoken agreement. Our past relationships were off-limits. Neither of us wanted to deal with jealousy, and our opposite work schedules already strained our marriage. I didn't want to run into someone from her past, and I had no desire to admit that I had been with her sister when we were younger. Somehow, we managed to get along, even if we rarely saw each other. One evening, Laura asked me to fix Megan's leaking sink, knowing Frank was useless with repairs. I agreed, promising to stop by before heading to work. But throughout the day, I couldn't shake thoughts of Megan's past, fueled by things Frank had hinted at. Still, I had no intention of letting her advances get to me. Whenever she flirted, I deflected with humor, unwilling to risk my marriage over something fleeting. When I arrived, Megan greeted me in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. As I worked on the clogged sink, stuffed with eggshells and potato peels, she lingered nearby, her presence heavy with intent. "What exactly are you doing, Megan?" I asked. "I want you," she said bluntly. I sighed. "Megan, stop. I'm just here to fix your sink." She hesitated, but as soon as I stood up, she pressed again. "So, are you going to sleep with me now?" I shook my head. "No, Megan. I love Laura. She's your sister, and I won't betray her." She scoffed. "Have you forgotten how things were in high school? Are you too good for me now?" "Megan, please," I said, exasperated. "I do find you attractive, but that doesn't change anything. Laura doesn't know about our past, and unless you tell her, she never has to." A sly smile crept across her lips. "You're a fool. Either you sleep with me, or I'll tell her we did anyway. And trust me, she'll believe me. I'm her sister, after all." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "Why would you do that? Why try to ruin us? Laura loves you." She let out a cold laugh. "My perfect little sister. Let's see how she feels when she hears the truth." I took a deep breath. "Then I'll tell her myself." Grabbing my tools, I made it clear I was done. Not just with the sink, but with whatever game she was playing. Without another word, I left, my mind racing. Would she really go through with her threat? Would Laura believe her? Back at work, I tried calling Laura, but there was no answer. I left a message, telling her I loved her and that we needed to talk about her sister. The rest of the day was a blur, my thoughts consumed by the impending confrontation. By evening, I called again, but still, no response. Later, I found out she had gone out with Megan and Frank, leaving the kids with me. I decided to keep them overnight. "Everything all right, Jake?" Laura's mom asked when I stopped by. "Yeah, it's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just, if you see her, let her know I love her and that I'll see her tonight." That night dragged on. I knew I had to talk to Laura before Megan could get to her first. When my shift finally ended, I drove home, bracing myself for what was coming. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart sank. Megan's car was parked outside. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and walked into a nightmare. There they were, Laura, Frank, and Megan, entangled in something I couldn't unsee. Fury erupted inside me, and everything after that became a blur. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. A uniformed officer stood beside me. "Good, you're awake," he said. "I'm Patrolman Tommy Wallace." My head throbbed as confusion settled in. Where am I? Where's my wife? What happened? "Take it easy, Mr. Harper," he said. "You suffered a concussion, a blow to the head with a glass vase. There was an altercation at your home. Charges were considered, but ultimately dropped. You should count yourself lucky. It could have meant 18 months in jail." I blinked, struggling to process. "What about the attack on me?" "Witnesses say you got into a fight with your brother-in-law. His wife stepped in and hit you with the vase to stop it. It was a single blow, not an assault, which is why no charges were pressed." "And Laura?" "When we arrived, she was extremely intoxicated. According to your sister-in-law, she had been drinking heavily that night." I stared at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The officer sighed. "You got into it with your son-in-law. He was trying to protect your wife. She doesn't remember much, just shouting. If the charges were dropped, why am I still here?" I asked. "My supervisor called when you hadn't returned home. I was told to wait for your statement." I shook my head. "I have nothing to say." I wasn't about to broadcast that I had caught my wife with another man, so I lay there in silence. "All right, that's your call," the officer said. "The doctor wants you here overnight. Consider yourself lucky. No charges were filed." With that, he left, and I was alone with a pounding headache. What now? I couldn't bear the thought of staying with a cheating wife, but I needed answers. I called my sister, Hannah, to pick me up in the morning. I wasn't about to rely on Laura, not after this. As I waited, the phone rang. It was her. "Should I come get you? We need to talk now that we're even." "Even? What are you talking about?" "You cheated with Megan, so I evened the score." Hannah was already on her way. "I just wanted to grab my things and go." "What do you mean, leave?" Laura snapped. "I only did it to get back at you." "I'm not discussing this over the phone. Hannah and I will be there soon. We'll talk then." I hung up. When we arrived at the house, I asked Hannah to wait in the car. I wanted to avoid a scene. Laura opened the door. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "At my mom's." I got straight to the point. "Did you listen to my voicemail?" "Yeah, but Megan told me you forced yourself on her." "How could you?" I exhaled sharply. "That's not what happened. I went to fix her sink. She made a move, and when I refused, she threatened to lie about us." "I don't believe you. Megan wouldn't lie to me." "She's jealous of our marriage, Laura. She wanted to break us apart. Letting Frank sleep with you was just part of their twisted lifestyle." "No, that's not true," she shot back. "I did it for revenge. You assaulted my sister, so I slept with Frank to even the score." I scoffed. "Megan knew intimate details about you, your mole, the fact that you're uncircumcised." I met her eyes. "Your sister's been with a lot of men. She knew those things because I was with her in high school, like many others. I never told you because I didn't want it to ruin us. Then you told me we should bury the past." She hesitated. "I don't know what to believe. Megan's my sister, and you're my husband. You should have come to me. Instead, you ran straight to Frank." "Did you really think raping your sister would fix things?" she blurted. "You had to want Frank pretty badly to believe them." "But Megan, I don't care what she says. If I assaulted her, why didn't she report it? She didn't want a scandal, but she had no problem calling the cops on me last night. She didn't claim I hurt her because it never happened." Laura's expression hardened. "You can believe whoever you want," I continued, "but this marriage is over. Why would you want to be with a rapist?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you. Look up love. It doesn't involve sleeping with other people." I grabbed my suitcase and packed a few essentials. "What about the kids?" she asked. "Tell them whatever you want. I'll arrange visits through a lawyer. Hannah will help with them." but I don't want to speak to you again. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. Hannah drove me to a budget motel. On the way, I told her everything. She didn't need convincing. She knew I was telling the truth. Life after. The following weeks were rough. I worked extra hours to cover expenses, found a small place, and ate out most days. In the divorce, we split everything equally. Child support didn't bother me. I loved my kids. I missed Laura, but I knew it was over. I attended school events, but kept my distance from her family. I saw my kids every weekend. Laura called often, but I only listened when it was about the kids. If she brought up us, I hung up. Megan stuck to her story, leaving Laura torn. Without proof, it was my word against hers. Laura chose to believe her, and that hurt the most. One afternoon, the school called. Liam wasn't feeling well. I picked him up and took him home. He had a slight fever, so I stayed with him. A little later, Laura arrived. As she went to check on Liam, the phone rang. Without thinking, I answered. It was Megan. "What are you doing there?" she sneered. I smirked. "Look who's calling the shots. You ruined our marriage." I let out a humorless laugh. Liam was sick, so I brought him home. And let's get one thing straight. You ruined my marriage. I forgot the answering machine was on. It recorded everything. "Is he okay?" she asked. "Why do you care? You're the reason his parents split." There was silence on her end. Then she sighed. "Jake, things got out of hand." "You knew exactly what you were doing," I shot back. "You knew we were swingers, and Frank wanted your wife. If you had just slept with me, none of this would have happened. But no, you had to come home and start a fight. You accused me of rape and made Frank assault Laura." "You're sick," I spat. Frank's voice cut in. "She wasn't forced, Jake. She willingly slept with me, and she'd do it again." I felt the blood drain from my face. Laura had been drunk that night. Megan had filled her head with lies, then sat back and watched as her husband violated her. I hung up, my hands shaking. Now I had proof. Megan's voice dripped with smug satisfaction. "Jake, you can't prove anything. I told you Laura would believe me. If you need some company, you know how to reach me. And tell Laura to call me later. Hope Liam feels better." She hung up before I could respond. I turned off the recorder, my hands tightening around the phone. Laura walked in. "Who was that?" "Your angelic sister, the one who never lies to you," I said bitterly. She frowned. What did she want? I held up my phone. I recorded her message. "She wants you to call her back." I exhaled, forcing my anger down. "See you in court Thursday. I guess that'll be our freedom day. Don't forget to listen to the message." Turning, I grabbed my keys and headed to my truck. On the drive home, my phone rang over and over, 10 times before I finally picked up. Laura's voice was shaky. "Jake, I'm sorry." Megan admitted she lied. "You never hurt her." "Good to know," I said flatly. "But it doesn't change a damn thing. You slept with Frank without even giving me the chance to explain. Even when I told you the truth, you chose your sister's lie over me. You actually thought I was a rapist." I gritted my teeth. "I loved you, Laura. Maybe I always will. But I also hate you for what you did to us, to our family." Silence stretched between us. "Jake, please." I hung up. On Thursday, I took 2 days off work, signed the divorce papers at my attorney's office, and left before Laura arrived. Numb, I went to a neighborhood bar, hoping a drink would dull the ache in my chest. But when I spotted Frank sitting there, laughing like nothing had happened, my blood boiled. I didn't think, I just acted. I launched at him, my fists slamming into his face, again and again. It took multiple people to pull me off. Cops showed up, and I was arrested. At the station, I made one call, to Hannah. "I messed up," I admitted. "Don't post bail. I'll take my punishment." Tears filled her voice. "Jake." Laura tried visiting me in jail, but I refused to see her. 2 months later, my case went to court. I pleaded guilty to assault and got 2 years, minus time served. Hannah stored my belongings and gave me updates. "Laura's not doing well," she said. "She wants to see you." "I don't care," I muttered. "Her family is furious at Megan. They believe you now. And Jake." Laura never signed the divorce papers. "Legally, you're still married." Prison was hell. Every day was a fight. sometimes literally. You either earned respect or got swallowed up. My cellmate, Bryant, was a lifer with a violent past. We clashed at first, but over time, he opened up. One day, out of nowhere, Laura showed up. I kept my face hard. "Why are you here?" Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she pushed photos toward me. "Jake, I still love you." Tears streamed down her face as I took the pictures. Our kids, smiling, happy. "I've moved on," I said, my voice hollow. "Take care of them." She sniffled. "I never finalized the divorce. I'll wait for you, however long it takes." I clenched my jaw, turned away, and walked back to my cell. That night, I overheard inmates plotting to attack Bryant. He had enemies. Without being a snitch, I gave him a heads up. The next day, the ambush happened. But Bryant had prepared. He stuffed 2 thick books under his shirt, shielding his kidneys. The knife barely made a scratch. His allies handled the attacker while the guards rushed in. Bryant went back to eating like nothing had happened. After that, we talked more. One night, he asked, "Do you still love her?" I hesitated before answering. "Yeah, but I can't forgive her." "Then don't let it eat you alive," he warned. "Regret is a prison worse than this one." His words stuck with me. A month later, Laura visited again. This time, she was holding drawings from our kids, crayon sketches of us together as a family. "They miss you, Jake," she said softly. "I miss you." I clenched my fists. "Laura, I want to forgive you, but it's hard. Seeing you with Frank, it's burned into my mind." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't want him. I hated every second of it. I was drunk and stupid, and I regret it more than anything. "I only want you." A part of me wanted to believe her. Another part of me wasn't sure I ever could. A few weeks later, Hannah visited, her face tense. "I saw Megan and Frank at your house," she said cautiously. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. "What?" "I don't know why they were there," she admitted. "But I thought you should know." Doubt flooded my mind. I was finally close to forgiving Laura. Was she lying again? One night, Bryant pulled me aside. "You helped me once. Now it's my turn." He used to be a lawyer. Said he had connections that might get me out early. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but I had nothing left to lose. A few weeks later, I was called into the warden's office for my parole hearing. The prison governor studied me. "Mr. Harper, we've reviewed your file. You had difficulty adjusting in the beginning. Is that accurate?" I met his gaze. "Yes, sir, but I've tried to change." For the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. If released early, where would you live and work? I had to think fast, knowing my answer was crucial. My sister and her husband offered me a place to stay, and my former employer expressed interest in rehiring me. "Aren't you married, Mr. Harper?" "Yes, sir, but we were in the process of divorcing when I was sentenced." "I'm not sure where things stand now." The board members exchanged glances. "We appreciate your honesty. We were already aware of your marital status and wanted to test your credibility. When it comes to early releases, we remain cautious about recidivism." "I understand. I assure you I have no intention of coming back here." "Return to your cell, Mr. Harper. We'll notify you of our decision by the end of the month." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your consideration." Back in my cell, Bryant leaned back on his bunk, eyeing me. "So, how'd it go?" I relayed the conversation, ending with, "I don't know if they'll approve it." "You never know," he said with a grin. "But if you do get out early, I expect a weekly box of cigarettes on my account." A few days later, Laura visited, looking nervous. A parole board rep came to the house. "Did they?" I asked, studying her expression. "Are you getting out?" "What did they ask you?" "They wanted to know where you'd be living, if you'd be staying here." She hesitated. "I told them I'd love to have you back." I changed the subject. "Have you been seeing Megan and Frank?" Her expression darkened. "She's my sister, Jake. I don't see her often." "And Frank?" "Why all the questions?" she snapped, clearly uncomfortable. "You said you wouldn't see them, but they were at the house together. Did something happen with Frank again?" Her eyes darted away. "When I get out, I'll settle things," I said coolly. "And if you're still seeing him in the meantime, I'll deal with that too." She stormed out without another word, confirming my worst suspicions. I called Hannah later. The parole board spoke to Mr. Thompson about my job. Did he say anything to you? Yeah, they called him. He said he'd rehire you in a heartbeat. You were one of his best employees, she reassured me. You have no idea how much that means. They also said you'll likely be released next month, she added, her voice thick with emotion. Her words lifted a weight off my chest. A week later, I got the call. My release was scheduled. The name of a lawyer handling my case was provided, along with instructions to report to an agency after my release. It struck me as odd. Why a lawyer instead of a parole officer? But I wasn't about to question it. I turned to Bryant. Looks like I owe you some cigarettes after all. He smirked. I told you. Stepping outside the gates, I spotted Hannah waiting for me. Tears streamed down her face as she ran into my arms. Welcome back, Jake, she choked out. Her husband greeted me warmly when we arrived at their house. Laura filed for divorce while you were inside, Hannah told me. She met with a lawyer a while back. So, my suspicions were right. She had moved on. Fine. Now I was free too. I needed to set up visitation with my kids. Before heading to Laura's, I called first. I just want to talk on the porch, I told her. I don't want any trouble. Reluctantly, she agreed. But if things get heated, I'm calling the police. When I arrived, my kids came running. Daddy, Daddy, you're back. I crouched down, wrapping them in my arms, breathing them in. God, I had missed them. After talking for a while, I urged them to ride their bikes. Remember when your mom and I used to sit on the porch and watch you? Laura sat stiffly beside me. These kids are mine too, I reminded her. I want to be part of their lives. She met my eyes. I never said you couldn't be. You say that, but then you went back to Frank and Megan. Her face hardened. I told you, I won't expose them to that lifestyle. I exhaled, gripping the porch railing. Actions speak louder than words. She sighed. I've changed, Jake. We'll see. I kissed my kids goodbye, promising to see them again soon. As I walked away, a heavy sense of unease settled in my gut. I needed legal advice. I hadn't even spoken to the lawyer who secured my parole. At the law office, I approached the receptionist and handed her the card the parole board had given me. May I see Mr. A.J. Monroe, please? I have an appointment. Name's Jake Harper. She nodded. Mr. Monroe will be with you shortly. Please have a seat. As I sat down, I replayed our conversation. Had she said Miss Monroe? The card clearly said A.J. Monroe. I assumed it was a man. A few minutes later, I heard a voice. Mr. Harper? I looked up and froze. A stunning woman in a navy blue suit stood before me. Her shoulder-length dark hair framed her face perfectly, and when she smiled, dimples appeared. She extended a hand. I'm A.J. Monroe. I stood, shaking her hand, still caught off guard. Jake Harper, I presume, she said smoothly. I've been reviewing your case. From what I've gathered, you didn't receive fair representation. Let's discuss this further in my office. I followed her, still reeling. If she had asked, I would have followed her anywhere. She shut the door behind us and motioned for me to sit. Well, Mr. Harper, she began, we finally meet. Please call me Jake, I said. I owe you my life. But I have to ask, why me? She leaned back, studying me. A friend asked me to look into your case. Your lawyer failed to mention key details, your pending divorce, extenuating circumstances. I presented these to the parole board, and they agreed your sentence was excessive. Who hired you? I asked. She smirked. Look, Jake, a friend called in a favor, and I got results. Does it really matter who? I wasn't sure. Can I call you AJ? I asked, a little unsure of why I cared. Her smirk widened. Yes, you can. There are some things we need to discuss. Would you join me for lunch? She hesitated. I don't usually meet clients outside the office. It's not a date, just lunch, I clarified. She smiled. All right, Jake. Let's call it a business meeting over lunch. She let her assistant know we were stepping out, and I watched her rise. She carried herself with a rare blend of confidence and charm, something I hadn't expected from a lawyer. We ate at a quiet restaurant. Over lunch, she explained my parole conditions, regular check-ins, staying out of trouble, and proving I could reintegrate into society. Angie, tell me something about yourself, I said between bites. Jake, discussing my personal life with a client wouldn't be appropriate, she said, though her tone was softer than before. Fair enough, but you've got an amazing smile, I said, watching as a faint blush touched her cheeks. Tell me about your background then. How'd you get into law? She sipped her water. I earned a scholarship and worked my way through law school. Criminal law fascinated me. I wanted to help people who deserved a second chance. As we talked, I couldn't help but admire her. She was sharp, driven, and had a kindness that set her apart. Will I see you again? I asked as we finished. You'll need to come back next week for paperwork with your parole officer, she said. Then, after a pause, she added, we can have lunch then. Back at the office, she extended her hand, and I held it briefly, wondering what was running through her mind. As I left, I noticed her secretary giving me a knowing smile. Returning to work, I found my rhythm quickly. My coworkers treated me with quiet respect, no one daring to challenge me. For 2 consecutive Mondays, Angie and I met for lunch, keeping things professional. By the 4th week, things changed. Jake, our professional collaboration has come to an end, she said, folding her hands on the table. Are you still my lawyer? Of course. Call me if you run into any issues. I took a deep breath. Angie, I'm going to have to terminate our arrangement. She frowned. Terminate? After everything I did to help you? Yeah, because I don't want a professional relationship with you anymore. I want to take you on a real date. No legal talk, just us. She stared at me, searching for something in my expression. Jake, there's definitely an attraction, but what will people think? I don't care about what they think. Just give me one date. If it doesn't feel right, we don't have to do it again. She sighed, debating it internally. All right, but don't expect anything more. On Saturday, I borrowed a car from Hannah instead of using my old truck. Pulling up to Angie's townhouse, I barely recognized the woman who opened the door. She looked stunning. For a moment, I wanted to pull her into my arms, but I reminded myself to act like a gentleman. We went to an upscale restaurant, enjoying wine and a slow dinner. Later, we found ourselves listening to soft music and talking. Angie, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? She hesitated. You know my story, Jake. I know bits and pieces, but I'd rather hear it from you. She exhaled. My parents had a troubled marriage. It ended when my father was sentenced to prison. I was 14. My siblings couldn't forgive him, but I still loved him. I also carried guilt, because I was the one who told him about my mother's infidelity. Maybe if I had stayed quiet, things would have been different. Angie, you were a kid trying to do the right thing. What happened wasn't your fault, I said gently. She gave me a sad smile. After that, I made a promise to myself. I'd go to college, become a lawyer, and help him. That's why I specialize in criminal law. But despite my efforts, there wasn't much I could do for him. She took another sip of wine. As for your other question, about my last name, I wasn't married long. It's not something I like to discuss. I nodded, sensing the walls going up again. Jake, can we save the heavy conversations for another time? I'm actually enjoying myself tonight. Would you like to dance? I'm not much of a dancer, I admitted, but I'd love to hold you close. She smiled, and as we swayed to the music, I let myself enjoy the moment. Jake, I have trust issues, she murmured against my shoulder. Especially with men, considering the world I grew up in. If it weren't for my father's advice, I probably wouldn't have agreed to this date. I'll have to send him some extra cigarettes then, I teased. She laughed, but her voice turned serious. You mean a lot to me. I just don't want to rush into something I'm not ready for. I understand, I assured her. I'll earn your trust. Just tell me if I ever push too hard. When I walked her to her door, I leaned in and kissed her. She hesitated, then kissed me again before pulling back. Can I come in? I asked. Not tonight, Jake. It's too soon. Maybe next Saturday? That could work. Call me Thursday. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Over the next 2 Saturdays, we spent more time together. She was opening up to me, little by little. Jake, I want you to know me better. If we're going to keep seeing each other, I won't hide anything, she said one evening. I sat back, waiting. I told you I was married before. It happened during my freshman year of college. My boyfriend and I thought we were in love, so we got married after I got pregnant. Her voice softened, but we were too young. The marriage didn't last. She hesitated. I lost the baby. I reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to tell me everything tonight, I said. I know, she whispered, but I want to. I had a mishap, and we ended up divorcing. I kept the last name Monroe to distance myself from my maiden name, Miller, as my father insisted. Hearing Angie share such personal details felt like a turning point. She trusted me. She shifted the conversation. Tell me more about your kids. I'd love to meet them someday. I had already mentioned Angie to them, and my daughter, Emma, was particularly eager to meet her. Actually, I said, Hannah is hosting a family barbecue next Saturday, and you're invited. It would mean a lot if you came. She hesitated, her eyes avoiding mine as she processed the significance of the invitation. Then, after taking a deep breath, she leaned in and kissed me. Our first real kiss, unprompted and full of emotion. Pulling back, she exhaled. Okay, Jake, I'll come. What can I bring? I wasn't sure what women usually brought to these things, so I suggested she talk to Hannah. When I told Hannah about Angie coming, word spread fast. Suddenly, my parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles all wanted to meet her. Angie decided to bring potato salad, and Hannah later mentioned how sweet she sounded on the phone. I could hear the not-so-subtle hint in her voice. She had high hopes for us. Every weekend, I picked up my kids from Laura's house. We'd spend time at Hannah's or go on outings. I kept things civil when I asked about their mom. Liam mentioned that she was seeing someone. At first, I tensed, but Emma reassured me. He's our teacher, Mr. Reed. His wife died from leukemia, and he moved here for a fresh start. He has a daughter our age. We like him. I knew I had to say something to Laura. Laura, I don't care who you date, but your lies and betrayal destroyed us. If this man is good to you, don't take him for granted. And more importantly, be honest with him. Don't repeat the same mistakes you made with me. She looked down. He treats the kids well, Jake, and he respects the fact that you're their father. Good. I hope things work out for you. I really do. She nodded. I know I hurt you, but I hope I didn't ruin your future relationships. I exhaled. That's not for you to worry about. I left, knowing I had finally closed that chapter. I had rented a small 2-bedroom apartment a mile from Laura's place, so the kids had their own space when they stayed over. I still visited Hannah's a couple of times a week, mostly for dinner, but I enjoyed seeing them, too. The day of the barbecue arrived, and I found myself unusually nervous. As I waited outside, my pulse quickened when I saw Angie's car pull up. She stepped out with a warm smile, holding a bowl of potato salad. Make sure you try some, she teased. She looked breathtaking, but to me, she always did. Being around her made me feel something I hadn't in a long time. Pure happiness. I introduced her as my good friend, watching as she effortlessly charmed everyone. My parents took an instant liking to her. Don't let this one go, Jake, my dad said with a wink. We already adore her, and we just met her. Angie glanced at me and smiled. When I introduced her to Hannah, they exchanged a knowing look, one that seemed like unspoken approval. Jake, I never mentioned this before, Angie said later, but I met Hannah during your parole hearings. I raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it was relevant until now. I never expected we'd become close. I told you I'd always be honest with you, and I wanted to tell you now, not later. I processed her words. Have you spoken to anyone else I should know about? Yes. I talked to Laura, your ex-wife Nancy, and Frank. Hearing Frank's name made my jaw tighten. And your employer, she continued. I needed to make sure you'd have a job once you got out. Everything I did as your lawyer. I never expected to develop feelings for you before we even met in person. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. If you want me to leave, say the word, and I'll go. Leave. I repeated. All I could hear in my mind was her unspoken confession. She had fallen for me. I pulled her into a deep kiss, holding her close. Then, without another word, I took her hand and introduced her to the rest of my family. Be right back, I whispered to her. I'm picking up the kids. They can't wait to meet you. When I returned, Emma ran straight up to Angie, her eyes bright. Hi, I'm Emma. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? You're really pretty, just like he said. Angie laughed. Hi, Emma. You can call me Angie or AJ. And you're very pretty, too. It's really nice to meet you. Emma grabbed her hand. Come meet my big brother. He's 10 and a little shy around girls. Liam was quiet but polite, shaking Angie's hand. She knelt to speak to them at their level, and I could already tell they liked her. After a few minutes, Liam turned to me and said, We like her, Daddy. She's really nice. Angie just smiled at me. The barbecue was in full swing as the sun began to set. We were sitting together when Liam and Emma approached us. Dad, remember you said we'd go to the amusement park in 2 weeks? Can Angie come with us? Before I could answer, Liam continued, That way, when Emma and I go on the big rides, you'll have someone to talk to? I shot him a look. Bud, that's something you should ask me privately first. Angie might have other plans. Liam turned to her, apologetic. Sorry, Angie. I didn't mean to assume. She chuckled, kneeling in front of him again. Sweetheart, what your dad means is that you should ask him first before asking me. But for the record, I love amusement parks. And if it's okay with your dad, I'd love to go with you. Liam grinned. Maybe we can ride the roller coaster together? Angie winked at me. Sounds like a plan. Sure enough, we all headed to the amusement park, where the kids eagerly jumped on every ride. Angie kept her promise to Liam, riding the roller coaster and the Ferris wheel with him. On the drive home, Emma leaned forward from the back seat. Dad, you need a real car instead of your truck. Angie can't always use hers, and we won't all fit in your truck forever. Angie and I exchanged amused glances. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few weeks, I didn't see much of Angie. Work kept me busy on weekends, and she had court obligations. We spoke on the phone now and then, but it wasn't the same. One Saturday, after picking up the kids, we planned a trip to Chuck E. Cheese's, pizza, games, and prizes. As we settled in at home later, Emma suddenly piped up. Dad, can we invite Angie? I didn't want to get her hopes up, but I dialed anyway. Hey, Angie. It's Jake. Emma wanted me to give you a call. Any plans tonight? Oh, hey, Jake, she said warmly. I was actually going out with some friends. Okay. No worries. Have a great time. There was a pause. Jake, didn't Emma want to talk to me? It's okay. I don't want to bother you. Put her on, please. I handed Emma the phone, hearing only one side of the conversation. Hi, Angie. Dad's taking Liam and me to Chuck E. Cheese's for pizza and games. We thought you might want to come. I expected Emma to be disappointed, but instead, she grinned at me. Yeah? Okay. See you in half an hour. I blinked. Wait, what? Angie's coming, Daddy. She even said she's getting a car soon, so she doesn't always have to borrow one. Later that evening, after an incredible night of games, laughter, and winning a ridiculous number of stuffed animals thanks to Angie's expert skills, I dropped the kids off at Laura's house. Angie and I returned to my apartment, settling onto the couch. She shifted, looking nervous. Jake, you know I care about you, right? I wouldn't be here if I didn't, I assured her. She exhaled. I want to be with you. I haven't trusted a man in a long time. All I ask is that you be gentle with me. I don't want to feel used. I want to feel loved. You are, I whispered. We started on the couch, but eventually, we moved to the bedroom. I took my time making her feel cherished, running my hands over every inch of her, indulging in every sensation. I massaged her feet, trailed kisses down her body, and took my time showing her just how much she meant to me. Hours later, holding her in my arms, I realized how much I had missed this. Closeness, comfort, intimacy beyond just the physical. She fell asleep beside me, curled into my chest. The next morning, I woke early and made French toast. When she finally emerged, wearing one of my oversized t-shirts, she looked more beautiful than ever. You look amazing, I murmured. She laughed softly. You're just saying that because I'm wearing your shirt. We ate together, and as we finished, I reached for her hand. Angie, what do you want for our future? She hesitated. That's a big question for breakfast, Jake. You know how much I love you. My family adores you. My kids adore you. What's next for us? She sighed, smiling. I feel like I'm giving a legal statement. Jake, we've only known each other for a few months, and last night was our first time making love. But I do know this. I want you in my life every day. I took a deep breath. Then let's make that happen. She tilted her head. What do you mean? Marry me, Angie. Her eyes widened. I love you, I continued. And I know we haven't been together long, but I've never been more certain about anything in my life. Will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes, and she squeezed my hand. Jake, I don't take love lightly. I've made mistakes before, as I told you. But yes, I'll marry you. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. She reached up, touching my face. I promise to always be there for you and the kids. I know what happened in your past marriage hurt you, and I vow to always be honest and faithful. I just expect the same from you. I promise, I whispered, sealing it with a kiss. She sighed against my lips. You seem happy but also sad, I observed. What's on your mind? She wiped at her tears. Just thinking about my dad. He's going to be so happy. Her voice wavered. You know, most girls dream of their wedding day, walking down the aisle in a white dress, their father beside them. I realize now that won't be my reality, and it hurts. I wrapped my arms around her as she let out quiet sobs. The last time I got married, my father didn't even know, she murmured. By the time I reached out to him, I'd already lost the baby, and the marriage was over. Angie, don't apologize, I whispered. You've been through so much, and I know your father will be so proud of you now. She wiped her face and gave me a watery smile. You know, I've loved you since the first moment I met you. I blinked. What? You loved me from the start? She smirked. I've wanted you since I first laid eyes on you, but I guess you already knew that. I laughed. I didn't, actually, but I'm glad to hear it. She traced a finger along my jaw. When do you want to get married? As soon as possible. We agreed on 2 months from now. For the next few days, I walked around in a state of pure joy. I told Hannah and her husband, Kenny, who were thrilled. The next step was telling the kids. I called their house, putting them both on the console speaker so I could share the news at the same time. Hey guys, I have something important to tell you. Is it about Angie? Emma asked immediately. Yes. Liam perked up. Are you getting married? I smiled. Yes, I am. A beat of silence. Then cheers. Yes. Emma squealed. We love Angie. Liam chimed in. She's so cool, Dad. We're really happy for you. Tears stung my eyes. Thanks, guys. That means the world to me. Wait. Emma gasped. Do we get to be in the wedding? I laughed. Of course. I wouldn't have it any other way. I assured the kids the wedding was happening in a couple of months and that they were among the first to know. When I arrived at Angie's office, her secretary, Jessica, greeted me with a big smile. Congratulations, Jake. Angie already shared the news, and she's invited everyone to the wedding reception. I chuckled. Of course she did. Jessica buzzed Angie's office. He's here, she said before ushering me in. As soon as I stepped inside, I noticed Angie sitting at her desk, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. My stomach tightened. What's wrong, Angie? She sniffled and wiped at her face. I called the prison, spoke to the warden. I asked if my dad could have a one-day leave to attend our wedding. She swallowed hard. He told me it's impossible. My dad is prohibited from leaving under any circumstances. His life sentence is final. I reached for her, wrapping my arms around her. I'm so sorry. I know how much this means to you. She trembled in my embrace. It's getting worse, Jake. His cancer came back. He's in remission, but now the doctors say he has only 3 to 6 months left. I clenched my jaw, rage simmering beneath my skin. Why, God? Why put her through this? Angie, I've been sending your dad cigarettes ever since I got out. It was kind of a deal between us, I admitted. She managed a weak smile. I know. He doesn't smoke anymore. He trades them for things he needs. An idea sparked in my mind, but I hesitated to share it just yet. Instead, I kissed her forehead and promised, "I'll see you tomorrow." The next morning, I skipped work and headed to the prison. I needed to see Bryant and the warden. Bryant met me with a smirk. "You take care of my girl, Jake. Just make her happy. She deserves better than what life's given her." "I plan to," I assured him before pitching my idea. At first, he resisted, but after some back and forth, he nodded. "It's up to the warden now." I shook his hand before heading straight to the warden's office. The warden gave me a knowing look. "Jake, I see you're keeping it together and even getting hitched. But I'm sorry, Bryant's a lifer. We can't let him out, even for his daughter's wedding." "Warden, are you the one who makes most of the decisions here?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" I took a deep breath. "What if we hold the wedding inside the prison? Use the chapel, let Bryant walk his daughter down the aisle?" The warden's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of something. Curiosity, maybe. "You want to get married here just so her father can attend?" "Yes, sir. She hasn't seen him in over 14 years, and now he's dying. I know weddings have been held here before. We don't need anything elaborate, just the chapel for the ceremony." The warden leaned back, rubbing his chin. "All right, Jake. I'll allow it. Keep it small. You and Angie can each have 3 guests. Bryant can have a few fellow inmates. You'll need a prison attendant, too." I exhaled, relief flooding through me. "Thank you, sir. You don't know what this means to her." I hurried back to Bryant, grinning. "Dave," I called, using his first name for the first time. He chuckled. "That good news I hear?" The warden approved it. "Angie's getting married here, and you'll walk her down the aisle." Bryant's tough exterior cracked, emotion flickering in his eyes. "You don't know what this means to me, Jake." As I was about to leave, he handed me a small piece of paper. "Write this number down." I did. "What's this?" "Tell Angie to check her safety deposit box at the bank. She'll need her birth certificate. The account is still under her maiden name." I frowned. "What's in there?" He smirked. "She'll see." I promised him I'd take care of his daughter before heading straight back to Angie's office. The moment she saw my face, she narrowed her eyes. "Jake, what did you do?" I smirked. "Would you mind getting married in prison?" She blinked. "What?" I explained everything, the chapel, the warden's approval, and how her father would finally be able to walk her down the aisle. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. "God, I love you, Jake." I hugged her tight before handing her the note from Bryant. "Your dad wants you to check your safety deposit box." She nodded, and we headed to the bank together. At the vault, the attendant examined her birth certificate and led us to the deposit box. As Angie unlocked it, the first thing she saw was a letter. She unfolded it with trembling hands. "Dear Angie, if you're reading this, it means one of 2 things. You're getting married, or I'm gone. I hope it's the first. Inside this box is your mother's engagement ring. I hid it here so it would be safe for you. She had her faults, but she loved you, and I know she'd want you to have this. There are also bonds totaling $15,000 to help pay for your wedding. I set them up before I was sent away. When you see your brother and sister, tell them there's a box for each of them, too. Only yours has a ring in it. Congratulations, my little girl. Always be honest with your husband. Love, Dad." Angie covered her mouth, eyes shining with unshed tears. "He saved my mom's ring," she whispered. I took her hand. "Let's go invite your siblings to the wedding." That night, we visited her brother Ethan and sister Olivia. They were wary at first, but Angie explained the situation, the prison ceremony, their father's illness, and his final wish to see her married. By the time she finished, both of them had tears in their eyes. "We don't hate Dad," Ethan admitted, "but we never forgave him for what happened." Olivia nodded. "But hearing this, knowing he saved something for us, too, maybe it's time to let go of the past." They agreed to attend the wedding. Before we left, Angie handed them each a slip of paper. "Dad left deposit boxes for both of you. They're at the same bank." Ethan and Olivia exchanged stunned looks. "I guess Dad never forgot about us after all," Olivia murmured. Angie squeezed my hand as we walked back to the car. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." I kissed her forehead. "Let's get married." On the day of our wedding, Angie and I drove to the prison together. Hannah and her husband accompanied us, but waited in the car. Inside, a guard handed Bryant a suit, while I slipped into my rented tuxedo. In another room, Hannah helped Angie into her wedding dress. She had insisted I not see her until the ceremony. In the prison chapel, I stood at the altar, flanked by Ethan and Olivia, my new brother-in-law and sister-in-law, who would serve as my best man and Angie's maid of honor. A prisoner played the piano, filling the space with a solemn yet beautiful melody. Bryant's closest friends among the inmates sat quietly in the pews. The warden stood near the priest, surprising me by announcing there would be refreshments after the ceremony. It was an unexpected act of kindness. Then, the first notes of "Here Comes the Bride" filled the chapel, and everyone rose. Angie entered, arm in arm with her father, both of them in tears. Her wish had been granted. After 14 years apart, her father was walking her down the aisle on her wedding day. When they reached the front, everyone took their seats, leaving only the small wedding party standing. A guard entered, shutting the door behind him. The priest spoke. "Who presents this woman to marry this man?" Bryant squared his shoulders. "I do, sir," he said proudly before taking his seat. "Angelina Juanita Miller Monroe," the priest continued. "Do you take James Michael Harper as your husband?" With unwavering certainty, she answered, "I do." The same question was asked of me, and my response was just as firm. We exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other from this day forward. After all the pain we had endured, we were determined that nothing would ever come between us. Then, finally, I kissed my bride. Angie turned and wrapped her arms around her father, whispering something only he could hear. Afterward, we moved to a small adjoining room where we shared cake and punch, courtesy of the warden. Ethan and Olivia hesitated at first, but then, for the first time in nearly 15 years, they embraced their father. Tears flowed freely, years of pain and regret dissolving into one bittersweet moment of reconciliation. Hannah captured every moment with her camera. Tears, laughter, love. Before we left, I turned to Bryant. "Thank you, Dave, for everything." He nodded. "Just take care of my little girl." As we departed, Ethan and Olivia lingered, still deep in conversation with their father. It was a sight I never thought I'd see, and it warmed my heart. Back in town, we arrived at the reception, greeted with enthusiastic cheers from friends and family. Liam and Emma rushed into our arms, bubbling with excitement. Inside, guests erupted into applause as we entered. My parents had tears in their eyes. Angie's friends, many of whom I was meeting for the first time, welcomed me warmly. Jessica, Angie's secretary, approached us, pulling us both into a hug. "Congratulations, you two. You deserve all the happiness in the world." About 30 minutes into the reception, Hannah arrived with the photographs. She had enlarged some of them and laid them out for everyone to see. Ethan and Olivia, now accompanied by their families, gathered around a picture of Bryant. They introduced their children to the grandfather they had never met. Hannah handed out 4 sets of photos, one for Ethan and Olivia, one for Angie and me, one for herself, and the final set for Bryant's prison cell. Angie looked breathtaking in her wedding dress. If she had wings, she would have looked like an angel sent by God. I could barely take my eyes off her. We danced, we ate, we laughed, and we kissed, again and again, as glasses clinked all night. Colleagues at work told me I was the luckiest man alive. I didn't need them to tell me. I already knew. I had found something precious, and I would cherish it forever. For those wondering, Laura and Reed did not attend our wedding. This day was for Angie, and I wanted nothing to tarnish it. Watching her walk down the aisle with her father, seeing Ethan and Olivia forgive their dad, witnessing a family come together again. Those are moments I will never forget. It's been 6 months since the wedding. Laura and Reed got married last month. I'm genuinely happy for her. My kids say Reed is good to them, and that's all that matters to me. As for Frank and Aunt Nancy, they moved to another state. Good riddance. I switched to the day shift at work so I could be home with my kids and with Angie every night. 3 months after our wedding, Angie got pregnant. And then Bryant, Dave, passed away. The kids and I visited him every month until the end. It was a somber day, but I'm grateful we got to share one final piece of joy with him. We told him that Angie was pregnant. We told him that it was a boy. And we told him that we were naming him Noah James. For the first time in all the years I had known him, I saw tears in Bryant's eyes. Looking back, I realized just how much my life has changed. I went from being a betrayed, heartbroken man to finding the woman of my dreams in a prison of all places. Now, I'm happily married, expecting a child, and preparing to be a father again. Not a day goes by that I don't thank God for the second chance He gave me. For Angie, for my family, for the future we're building together. That's all.